Hey everybody, how are you doing today? It is time for us to jump into, you know what's coming, the big picture of the Bible. I'm glad you guys are with me, and I'm thinking we almost need like a theme song for big picture time, yeah, or something like that. So if you want to come up with a theme song for a big picture of the Bible time, you go right ahead and send it to me. I would love to see it. Let's get praying, and then we'll jump on in here. Lord, we thank you for the story of your word, what you are doing with us to rescue us out of our sinful and broken world and our sinful and broken hearts. Help me to talk clearly. Bless our time today. Amen. Alrighty, guys. Well, you know, as we've been going through our big picture of the Bible, we've been talking about the one big story that's within here. It's like the jigsaw puzzle that's coming together. And we said that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And that problem is a broken world and a broken relationship between us and God. And as we've been going through the stories in the Old Testament, we've been seeing there's basically two different ways to fix this problem, right? And you know what they are. The one thing that we see time and time again is that people try to be like Bob the Builder and say, can we fix it? Yes, we can. And that doesn't go so well every time. And the other solution is God's solution. He's saying, you know what? Trust me, obey me, and I'm going to send a rescuer to fix this situation. And as we've been moving through here, the past few weeks we've been talking about one of these patterns in our jigsaw puzzle that we've been calling exile. You guys remember what exile is? Exile is like our timeouts, right? That's like when I did the naughty thing with the gummy worms and got sent to timeout. Exile is when we're taken away from where we're supposed to be and put somewhere else so that we have time to think about what we've done. And this is something that happens over and over again. It's like this puzzle pattern that shows up in the Bible. It happens with Adam and Eve. They're taken out of the Garden of Eden and sent away. And then God brings them back to the promised land through Abraham. And then the people end up in Egypt. And God has to bring them back again through Moses. And then they go into exile. And God brings them back again from exile. So it's this thing that happens over and over and over again, where God's people are plucked out of where they're supposed to be and put somewhere else for a season before God brings them back again. And you think that after a few times of doing this, people would catch on and go, you know, this whole Bob the Builder approach of we can fix it, yes we can, maybe that's just not the best idea. And that's really where we're getting at in the story in the Bible where we're at. We talked about last week how Ezra and Nehemiah, they helped the people come back from exile out of Babylon back to the promised land, and they were trying to help them rebuild. And by this point, hopefully God's people are having humbled hearts where they say, you know what? We don't think we can fix it. We kind of need God's help. And so God says, well, now that I have your attention, let's talk about how I'm going to fix it. Now, question, here's your pause question for this week here. This is a review from last week. We talked about Ezra and Nehemiah, if you remember that. What three things, not two, what three things did Ezra and Nehemiah go back to Jerusalem to help rebuild? What were they rebuilding? What three things? First two might be easy. The third one's a little challenging. So hit pause and go now. Okay, hopefully you paused. Okay, the three things we talked about that they were rebuilding is, first thing was the temple. This is where they would worship God in Jerusalem. So they had the altar there. They had their sacrifices. The second thing is they built a wall around their city to protect them from people with swords and spears, people who wanted to invade them. But the third and most important thing, did you get this one? The most important thing they were trying to help them rebuild is their hearts towards God. Because if you remember, we said that after they had their temple and after they had their wall, things still weren't right. They were like, which Disney character? Oh, Gaston. I can't remember the song for Gaston, but he's a fun character to talk about, right? We said that their city was like Gaston because it was all pretty on the outside, but had an ugly heart within. And that's kind of like Gaston, right? And so Ezra and Nehemiah, they didn't want to just rebuild a temple or the walls, but they wanted the people's hearts to come back to God. And this is what God wants. He says, listen, you tried this Bob the Builder approach for too long. Can I please finally have your attention so we can do it my way and so I can send my rescuer? And so they had a big church service, if you remember, and Ezra's reading the Bible, and all the people are like crying out, I did all this bad stuff. Ah! And Ezra says, don't worry, the joy of the Lord is your strength. God wants to restore you. He wants to bring you back to him. He wants to fix the problem, but you got to be willing to ask for help. And that's really where the story is. We're almost done with the Old Testament, and we're going to be talking about the New Testament with Jesus soon. But I want to spend about 2 weeks talking about the prophets, this week and next week, because the prophets, there's a lot of our Bible that's made up of what we call the prophets. These are people like Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel, Amos, Hosea. I mean, if you did your books of the Bible memory in Awana, you could probably sing the whole Old Testament and say some of these books. The truth is, sad thing, a lot of Christians don't read the prophets for quite some time. I mean, I can't really remember if we talk a whole lot about the prophets in the classes you've had so far. And part of the reason is that the prophets, the books are very long. They can be a little tricky to follow sometimes and a little hard to understand because of the language. And it's a real shame that people sometimes don't read them until they're older. I mean, I would recommend if you want to read them, maybe read them with your mom or your dad or an older brother or sister to help you work through some of them so you can understand, because there's so much important things that the prophets had to say to God's people. Now, we did talk about Elijah and Elisha, the prophets, right? And we said that one big role of the prophets, one thing that they did was they were like the cheerleaders, right? Don't trust idols. They are bad. If you follow them, you'll be sad, right? And they tried to encourage people to trust and obey God and to not be like Bob the Builder and try to fix things themselves and go after idols. This was probably the biggest role of the prophet. But now that we get towards the end of the Old Testament, the people are back in the land. They have their temple. They have their wall. But they have hearts like Gaston. They're looking to the prophets to hear, okay, we get it. We can't fix this ourselves. What is God going to do in the future to help us fix this problem? And that's what I want to look at these next 2 weeks, today and next week, is the prophets also tell about the future. And they say, God has a plan. Here's the how he's going to fix it. That's what we'll talk about today. And then we'll talk a little bit next week about who God's going to use to fix it. Okay, so 2 parts. God saying, this is how I'm going to fix your problem, and this is who I'm going to fix it through. And God tells his people these things in advance. That means ahead of time, so that when they happen, they go, yep, that was God. Just like he said he was going to do it, he sure did it. So that's what we're going to look at today here, is God's how he's going to fix the problem. And this is God's solution. Okay, we've been waiting for it the whole story long, right? Okay, God, we finally get it. We can't fix things ourselves. We can't fix the broken world. We can't fix the broken relationship with you. Every time we try, it gets worse and worse and worse. What are we going to do? And God says, here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to cut a new covenant with you. And you go, what's a covenant and what are you cutting? It's basically God saying, I'm going to make a new deal with you. An arrangement, right? Like I guess it's God and us. It's like this rather than this. And you might have things like this where you cut a deal with your sister or your brother, or maybe your mom and dad. Maybe you have a deal where you say, Dad, I will go out and rake the leaves every week, every Saturday, for 2 hours every Saturday, and you give me $10. Okay, that's a deal. You say, I will do this if you will do this. Okay, that's a deal. Or you might even make a deal like with your cousin, and your cousin maybe loves black jelly beans. Not everyone loves black jelly beans. And you say, hey, Lewis, that's a good name for a cousin, right? Lewis, I know you love black jelly beans, and well, I'm willing to cut a deal with you. I will give you all of my black jelly beans if in exchange you will give me all of your yellow jelly beans, which are about the best ones. Orange are pretty good. Green, okay. But yellow and orange are typically the best jelly beans. Okay, so you cut a deal, you make a deal with your cousin. And this is what God's saying. He says, I'm going to make a new deal with you, my people. And you say, a new deal? Well, what was the old deal, God? Okay, there's actually been a few. The first deal was between God and Adam and Eve. What do you think the deal was? Okay, you could probably hit pause on this for a second. What do you just talk for 60 seconds? What was the deal that God made between God and Adam and Eve? Pause. Okay, unpause. The deal was God was saying, you trust and obey me, and you can rule over this garden and this earth, and you can be my representatives on the earth, and I'm going to bless you. That was the deal. The rules were, don't eat that fruit that you're not supposed to eat. And of course, they broke the deal. Okay, it broke. The second deal that God made with his people was at Mount Sinai. Remember the burning mountain with Moses and the 10 Commandments and all this? God basically said, hey, people, I'm going to give you all these commandments, these rules, like the 10 Commandments, and if you trust me and obey me, you will be my special people and my representatives in the earth. And how did the Jews do it that one? That one broke. And God's saying, okay, I'm going to make a new deal with you, and this is how I'm going to fix this broken world, this broken problem. We have a broken relationship, there's a broken world, and this is what he's going to do. So we're going to read two passages here that talk about this new deal. The first one happens in the book of Jeremiah. He was one of the prophets. And Jeremiah is speaking to God's people while they are in their timeout in Babylon. And this is what God says to Jeremiah. This is chapter 31. I think I have a verse here. Here we go. And God says to Jeremiah, he's talking to him, to his people. He says, the time's coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant, a new deal, with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. So I'm going to cut a new deal with you, my people. It will not be like the covenant or the deal I made with their forefathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt. Okay, so he's saying, remember when they took them out of Egypt, they went to Mount Sinai. So he's saying it's going to be different from the old deal. Because they broke my covenant, even though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. So he's saying, even though I was like a husband is to a wife and they have a deal of marriage, my people broke that deal and they didn't obey me. They didn't trust me. They went after idols. But he says, this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. Okay, he says, this is the covenant. Here we go. This is the covenant I will make. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. And he actually goes on a little bit further from there. I will be their God and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness and remember their sins no more. Okay, so this part that I'm holding up here, this is part of the main thing here. He says, I will make the covenant or the deal I will make, I'll put my law in their minds. And you might go, what do you mean the law? Like you break the law, like you have a speeding ticket or you steal? Is that what he's talking about? The law are all these rules that he gave them at Mount Sinai. So like, don't have any other gods before me, honor your mother and father, those kinds of rules. He's saying, I'm going to put my rules, not just in a book, not just on a tablet, but I'm going to put them in your heart so that you want to obey me. And I'm going to forgive you. And the people hear this from Jeremiah and they go, okay, that sounds good, but how do you get all those rules in my heart so I want to obey you? I understand that we haven't been trusting you and obeying you so well. So how are you going to squeeze them into my heart? Are you going to put them through my nose or my ear and make it go down to my heart? Well, God gives a little bit more hint through another one of his prophets, and his other prophet is named Ezekiel. And this is, again, one of those prophets that we don't read a whole lot of in kids' classes, but is a good one to read. And Ezekiel, again, he was talking to people who were in their time out, they were in their exile, and he says the same thing that Jeremiah says, basically. I'm going to read from Ezekiel chapter 36 here, and this is what God says to Ezekiel. God says, I will take you out of the nations, so I'm going to take you out of exile. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back to your own land. So God says, I'm going to bring you back home. Okay, so he's saying, I'm bringing you back home. More than that, I will sprinkle clean water on you. Ah, it's like a nice shower, right? And you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your idols. So this is like the same thing where he says to Jeremiah, I will forgive you. So he's saying, I'm going to wash you clean. I'm going to forgive you. And then he says, this is the part I want to focus on. He says, I will give you a new heart. Oh, that got my attention. And put a new spirit in you. Huh? I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Let's think about this here. Let's see if I have anything else. It says, and I'll put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and careful to keep my laws. You will live in the land I gave to your forefathers. You will be my people. I will be your God. Well, here's the thing here. He's saying basically my new deal with you is I'm going to change your heart. Oh, it's like a heart swap or something like that, right? He says, I'm going to give you a totally new heart. I'm going to remove from you this heart of stone, this hard heart that says it's the Bob the Builder heart, right? The heart that says, can we fix it? Yes, we can. And put in them heart of flesh. And the difference here is stone and flesh, hard and soft. He says, I'm going to remove your hard heart that says, I want to be my own boss. And I'm going to give you a new heart that wants to follow me. And he says, I'm going to do this through my spirit. He says, I'm going to put my spirit in you. So basically saying, I'm going to be living in your heart so that you want to follow me, so that you want to trust me and obey me. And that's going to be different from the old covenant. The old covenant, right, was like Gaston, where you might look great on the outside but have a yucky heart. God is saying, I want to come in you so that you have me in your heart, so that you want to follow after me. There's no more Gaston heart. Should we rip him in half? Should we rip Gaston? No, don't do it. Oh, I did it. Okay, so no more Gaston heart, but a heart of flesh. And God illustrates this to Ezekiel by telling him kind of this interesting story. You might have heard this one before. I can't remember if we've taught it downstairs in the kids' classes or upstairs in the kids' classes at Bethel before. But basically, after God gives this promise to Ezekiel, and he says, I'm going to give you a new heart, a heart that's soft and one that's not hard. He says, let me give you a picture of this, Ezekiel. And he basically gives Ezekiel this vision, right? So it's like a dream, but he's like walking in the dream. And the dream, it's pretty creepy, okay? It's near Halloween, so I guess I can say this. God basically brings him in this kind of like vision or dream to this big valley. Have you ever been in a big valley? And it's full of human bones. Ooh, okay, kind of gross, right? Would you want to be in a valley full of bones? I mean, you probably wouldn't want to even be around like one set of human bones, but like a whole valley of them? Terrible. And God has Ezekiel look over all these dead bodies and say, Ezekiel, can these bones live? Okay, God, that's a hard question. So Ezekiel goes, you know the answer, God. So Ezekiel doesn't quite answer. He's basically saying, it's kind of, if I'm thinking about it, it's kind of like he's saying, I don't really think so, but you know what? You're God and I'm not, so I'm just going to go with whatever you say. And that was actually a pretty good answer from Ezekiel. And God says, these bones will live. He says, I want you to speak to the bones and tell them, get up and live, bones. And so Ezekiel's like, okay, this is a little weird. And so he says, okay, bones, get up and live. And then all of a sudden you hear this. All the bones are moving and rattling. Ah! And the bones reassemble and make people. And then flesh comes on the people so that they have skin and muscles and hair again. And Ezekiel's just like, whoa, that's amazing. But here's the thing, the vision's not over yet. God says, what's wrong with these bones that came to life again is that they're just kind of sitting there like empty bodies like this. Okay, they're not doing anything. They're not moving around. They're not talking. They're not animated. They're just kind of bones that have flesh on them now, standing upright, just kind of like, right? And Ezekiel gets it. The picture is not complete. These living bodies are not fully living because they're still missing something within. So God says to Ezekiel a second time, he says, okay, now that we have all these living bodies, let's fill them up with my Spirit. Speak to the Spirit and say, fill them up, Spirit. And Ezekiel does this. He says, okay, Spirit, fill them up. And whoosh, this rushing wind fills up these people, and they come to life again, and they're animated and everything. And this is what God says out of this illustration to Ezekiel. He says, this is what the sovereign Lord says, "O my people, I'm going to open up your graves and bring you up from them." Because remember, they were in exile. They felt like they were just dead people. God saying, I'm going to bring you back to life again. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my Spirit in you, and you will live and settle in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. And this whole point here is he's saying, I'm not just going to bring you back to your own land, because that's where they were, right? They had their temple, they had their wall. He says, I'm going to go even further than that, because we can see that your whole "can we fix it? Yes, I can" plan ain't working so well for you. How's that working out for you? Not so well. So he says, I'm going to give you help. I'm going to come live in your heart so that you have a soft heart, so that my rules are within your heart and you want to obey me. And that's the deal I'm going to cut with you. I'm going to make a deal where I'm going to fix your heart and put my Spirit, and I'm going to live within you. And the people go, wow, that's great. That's a good plan, God. We like that. But who's going to make this happen for us? When Moses cut that first deal with us, right? You were up on the mountain, we were down at the bottom of the mountain. Moses went up on the mountain and made this deal happen between us and you. Do you remember this hand signal here? This is where the puzzle pieces of the Bible start to snap in place and fit together. Do you remember when God talked about the rescuer, the one who's going to crush the head of the serpent? He says to Moses, he says, I'm going to raise up a prophet like you. And the whole point here was Moses was on Mount Sinai. He was like this middleman, this funnel between God and mankind. And so God is saying, I'm going to raise up someone special, a rescuer, to make this new deal happen where I forgive your sins and where I put my Spirit in you. And this is setting us up for what we'll see is Jesus as the rescuer here. But all the pieces are fitting together. It's not just like there's just one book of the Bible where someone came up with a good plan. It's all these different places over hundreds of years where these pieces all snap together to say, this is your problem, but this is the solution. I'm going to cut a new deal with you, kind of like it was with Moses, but I'm going to give you a new heart, and I'm going to do it through my rescuer. So we will talk about what the prophets have to say about who that rescuer is. Ooh, I think we already know, don't we? But we'll go ahead and tune in next week, and then pretty soon we'll be in the New Testament already, and we'll see how our lives fit in with all this. So thanks so much. We'll see you next week.